Hello and welcome to Sean's Thoughts. I apologize if the microphones sound a little different than I normally do. I'm actually, as you see, putting one on my shirt here because today I have a special treat for you. Today I want to read from a book called this one right here. It's called, well, you can see what it's called, The Medical Medium's Life-Changing Foods. And I I'm thinking about maybe in the future going forward, perhaps leaving a little bit of the introduction to something that I might share, such as what we're going to talk today about rose hips. So today we're going to talk about projections. But before we get to that, welcome to Sean's Thoughts, a podcast where I essentially talk about whatever it is that I'm drawn to. And quite honestly, a lot of the times the things that I'm drawn to come out of nowhere, as if I'm being directed or maybe even called into action by something. And with that being said, I hope that you take the opportunity to perhaps consider all that liking and subscribing stuff and, let's get this new earth on the road. But before we worry about any of that and, talk about other stuff, I want to get into, as I said, talking about rose hips. And I'll give a little bit of a background with rose hips. Now, rose hips are the part that's on a rose plant, and it's considered the fruit of the rose plant. And this amazing nutrient and very available resource is abundant. Like roses, I realized they grow all year long. And while some people consider them to be thorny nuisances or romantic, iconic images, they're actually a very, very healthy and nutritious fruit that I personally utilized in my own healing practice. And so I kind of wanted to talk a little today about rose hips in the introduction portion before I get into what I'm actually going to talk about, because I think it's very important. See, so I'm looking at the book. I'm not going to read word for word, but just kind of scanning through. See, we realize that vitamin C is something that is of essential requirement for the human body in order to prevent that thing called scurvy that they had on the pirate ship. Well, rose hips actually have a considerable amount of bioavailable vitamin C, far better than most of the vitamin C's that you can get within your mainstream stores, your shoppers drug marts, your superstores. See, I'm speaking from Canada and London Drugs, which is on the West Coast. But a lot of those vitamin C's, they use something called citric acid or absorbic acid, I think. But anyways, they use some sort of that for the vitamin C. And yet there are natural places such as celery juice, of course, but also rose hips that can give you a lot of vitamin C. And vitamin C is something that's so important for our body. Now, other things that we would want to talk about in the rose hips category is the amount of nutrients. And you can definitely, I highly recommend picking up these books, but you can actually use rose hips to combat against so many different ailments as EBV. And if you don't know what EBV stands for, it's the Epstein-Barr virus. And it has been shown to be responsible for so many ailments in the human body. And so by adding rose hips to your daily routine of health and such, you can definitely catapult your healthy whole body into a whole new level of healing. And so, as I said, this was one of the things that I was essentially guided towards taking on in my own healing regime. And funny enough, I was at the store and the health food store at that, and I was guided to actually buy rose hips when I was there. I say take, I meant pick up. But nonetheless, I bought a huge package of rose hips and they sat in my cupboard for quite a long time until the last year I got very sick or cancel. Something made me very sick because I didn't get it. Anyways, amazingly enough, I went through the illness for quite a long time before I got the kick in the ass because I kept getting reminded that I had rose hips, but I really didn't know what they were. And so I went and I grabbed this book that I already had in my bookshelf. And I read all about rose hips. And as soon as I incorporated that into my healing regimen, the sickness went almost away quite rapidly. And so, of course, there was other things that were in conjunction with it, but yet rose hips seemed to be the key that allowed that to happen. And so I highly encourage you to definitely look into it. See, rose hips are amazing for alleviating UTIs, and that's urinary tract infections. Like, they do so many different things. If you have conditions, so like they have a whole bunch of conditions that rose hips could be used for: ear infections, dental issues, gum disease, urinary tract infections, bladder infections, kidney infections, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, that's SIBO, a whole bunch of other words, including colds, influenza, sinus conditions, skin conditions, strep throat, stites, eye infections, toe and fungus, adrenal fatigue. Anyways, there's so many different possibilities that rose hips can help with. And so I highly recommend that, possibly if you're drawn to come to this particular podcast, then perhaps there is a reason why you're here. And with that being said, I kind of want to highlight on something before we get into the main topic today, which is projections. I want to highlight, if you're here for a reason. It might be this reason, maybe other than rose hips, there's something else. And I'll talk a lot about this: burdock root and dandelions. They grow everywhere, but maybe there's a reason for that. So I'll talk a lot about different healing modalities, but yet back to what I was saying, perhaps there's a reason you're here. And I use the word perhaps, but I just use that as a soft touch, because recognize, or at least I have, one thing that's so important is that people who connect, they connect for a reason. And whether that reason's here to observe me, watch me, make sure that I'm not saying anything I shouldn't be saying, because then you'll go and edit my video, or perhaps you're here, you feel that it might be random, but yet, your guide or your guardian or your angel, or however you choose to connect with God, has guided you to click on this thumbnail to watch this podcast. So if you've enjoyed what I just talked about rose hips, and you feel somewhere inside you that that might help, then definitely go do some research on it, or just go and get the rose hips and make a tea, drink it, and feel amazing. So if you're here, there's a reason. And I hope and I trust, I have faith that you will stay here. I have faith that although my videos at the current moment in time, they only receive a few dozen at best views, some of the some of the AI YouTube shorts, they maybe go up to over 1,000 views, or even I've had the occasional do no thing challenge that goes up to a few views, or 1,000 views. But most of my videos rarely see the day of light. And so I want to ask you, before we get into what we're talking about today, because I normally leave it to the end, if you feel something here resonates, please stop the video right now. Well, you can't do it in the live stream, but it doesn't appear that anyone's here on the live stream, so that's okay. So most likely you'll watch this later. But stop the video right now and share this video or any of my other videos with 5 or 10 people, and don't even care who you're sending it to. Means we never know who we're guided to help with. And paying it forward in any way possible is definitely beneficial to the overall collective. And so if you're wanting to essentially heal yourself, to gain more vitality, to take back your life, take back your energy, take back our planet, you're in the right place. And so I highly encourage you, remain here, listen to all that I have to say, and then I highly encourage you to make a comment, of any type of comment. Even if you want to dismiss everything that I just said and call me a liar, or whatever it is you desire to lash out with, do it. I highly encourage you. I ask for you to do that, because you may be here, as I said, to monitor or watch, or perhaps distort what I'm saying. I often have my videos somehow distorted, whether it's the audio or like random edits, or the video just somehow poof, disappears. You might be the one responsible for that, but yet there might be another reason why you're here. So, anyways, let's get into today. So, today I want to discuss projections and what projections are. Now, have you ever, had a conversation and someone told you something? They told you a dream or something that they really, really wanted to do. And they were super excited about it. They had all of the ideas. Maybe they wrote them down, or, or you guys are in a bar and you guys are just talking and the person comes up with this great idea, or they come across an idea that they've had for a while and then they start talking to you about it. And then what you do is, you start coming back at them. Oh, well, you can't do it because of this, and this isn't going to work, and oh, I know someone who tried that, and then you talk them out of it. Did you know that you possibly, and maybe quite well, are projecting upon that person? At least that's how I've come to understand it. See, when we have the things that come out of our mouths, and they are essentially, when they are negative, we project that image on the people that we're talking about. We instill doubt and fear and limitation, essentially, not just in the mind or the programming that's already set in the other person. We also essentially do it to the world around us. Often we're observing and we're being quite critical of what's happening in the world and who's doing what, and what president is this, and what president, oh, that president did this, he's a bad guy, and that person did that, oh, I do it, blah, blah, blah. That person doesn't know what they're talking about. And yet, what we're unaware of is that oftentimes we are projecting our thoughts and our opinions and our essential words and feelings upon that person. I've often heard that there are what we'll call elite people on the planet, that they actually hire people, and some are referred to as black magic workers. And what these workers do is they protect those people, those essential people that are in our world that have a lot of projection on put upon them. So they're out in the world and they're seen doing many different things that, we might see as unreasonable or lacking common sense, or it's just hard to understand why that person made that decision. And oftentimes, these people are aware of what they're doing, and they actually hire people that project, or sorry, that protect them from those projections. And now the idea of projections just doesn't stop there. I once got this great piece of advice, is to not tell people what your dreams are. And the idea, or the slogan, was don't let people steal your dreams. And this was a moment of truth, or a moment of great insight that I received from Mr. Kevin Trudeau. And what he explained to me is that oftentimes when we tell people what our greatest passions and dreams and things we want to do, if that person has any sort of limitation or block in their own mind, they often will project it upon us. And as I said, sometimes it's about what they saw in a movie, or they heard that a friend did. You say, oh, I'd like to do such and such. And they're like, well, I know a cousin's friend, sister's boyfriend's mother's daughter's boyfriend's girl that tried that exact same thing and it didn't work. And then lo and behold, most times it doesn't work. And it's not just because they're implying self doubt, because that's part of the process. That person hears that, and now they have somewhat of a reference point of, oh, well, it didn't work for them. Why would it work for me? And then they start projecting the negativity upon themselves as well. And then it spirals all the way downhill. And it doesn't stop right there, because then it goes into the next stage in either of those two people, but oftentimes the one who projected originally, who heard their best friend's idea for an awesome idea. And because, maybe he's jealous, or maybe he is a little unhappy that his friend is going to possibly do something, or his friend has a great idea. And so therefore he's like, well, I don't like that. I'm not doing that. And then they have these negative feelings about it. And then they're projecting it on. And yet also it spirals more and more when they go to their group of friends and they start talking about it. That Bob had this great idea. Oh, well, it wasn't so great. And then they go on, and then their friends chime in. And then all of that energy ends up going over to that person and limiting them. As I've mentioned before, we live in a world of energy. If you were to look to the smallest particle of what this body is and what the walls and everything around, including my two paintings, are, we would all see energy. Energy in the artificial, perhaps Ethereum in the organic. But nonetheless, we would see what we see as energy. And energy is as one of those theories or those laws of the conservation of energy is energy remains always. Like it says that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. However, I do believe that energy can be added to a system. So, therefore, in a sense, it can be created and destroyed, but not necessarily created and destroyed, but it can be added to a system and it can be removed from a system. Anyways, regardless of that, everything is energy, including the things we say. When we say words, like you can feel that there's breath coming out of your mouth. Well, that is energy. That is energy moving through the air that's around you. And so you can feel that. But our words, when they come out of our mouth, they echo and they vibrate out into the world and they go somewhere. And oftentimes, because we are conscious beings and the world has so much more consciousness than we'd ever imagine, that energy is going towards that person. And like I said, it's not just about adding doubt to their field, it's also about projecting. And the way I see it is having like this shield on that person that limits their ability to do something. It's part of self, it's part of so what I'm looking for, I'm repeating it again, like self-doubt. But it's also part of what I see as like a thin layer over that person and limiting. But keeping in mind, I'm using the word projection for a reason to define it. Because a projector, in this case, or our eyes as a projector, we can project what we see. So even the more that we repeat and we use our words, and a lot of those words we don't even use correctly, we can therefore cast an image on that person of what we believe they are. And then, of course, we can project back on ourselves what we believe ourselves to be. And so, oftentimes, the words and the things we say, they limit us significantly because they bring our belief in ourselves and our friends and our families and other people's down. But they also create a lot of talking and a lot of wasteful discussion. And that often happens so much. And we'll go back to those elite people when we're sitting in coffee shops and we're talking and gossiping and criticizing and thinking that we know better, and we start being critical and then even a lot times being hateful and somewhat evil, saying things that we wouldn't ever say, like to our families. We wouldn't ever sit down at the kitchen table and start talking about how we want to end so and so's life, and if I had a this and I would do this. We would never actually do it. And yet we talk so much about that stuff. And therefore we create a lot of, well, negative energy. And then we cast that onto those people. And that's why those so called elite people have workers that actually help shield them, because they live in a world where they recognize that our energy of our words and even our thoughts, they have so much power to affect and to essentially negatively impact. Oftentimes, whenever you're sitting there and, out of the blue, someone's a memory or an idea of someone pops into your head, oftentimes that's the response or the reaction of that person is thinking about you. Maybe they picked up a picture and they're remembering you, or they're scrolling through their Facebook, or they're doing something and it suddenly gets you on their mind. That energy goes out into the world and has a possibility, or oftentimes an actual pretty good success, in order for you to suddenly, oh, I'm thinking about that person that I haven't thought about in such a long time. That's weird, because I was, and then you were doing something completely different. And that's another example of that person not necessarily projecting, but that they have the ability to telepathically transmit our energies, or their energies, and then we're kind of like picking it up. And so when we're walking out into the world and we're doing things, and what I mean by doing is we're talking about other people. It's often very, very, very important to mind your words and mind your thoughts as well. If you're going to rage out and say something negatively about someone, which is essentially, or gossip about people, especially when you're doing it in a very negative way, in a very hurtful, painful way, those people are receiving that energy. And when you become aware of that and you're able to step back and stop talking about it, Like there's been many situations where I was involved in a conversation, then all of a sudden someone starts talking about other people in a negative way. And most people will chime in with their additions to that negativity. But yet I learned how to actually sidestep and avoid that, step back from that and not have that happen because I didn't want any of that negative impact on me. And yet, through this whole healing journey, I have honestly felt the projections that so many people were placing on me. So many people who didn't bother asking what the truth was about me. They listened to what hearsay or what the local gossip person said or what they think they thought they saw. They listen to all of this stuff and then they get into their little groups and they start talking about it. And all that energy sometimes shows up or in my field, within my gut or different parts of my body. And, I would use TFT in order to tap a lot of that out. I would often also go to Starbucks where I would sit in the middle of Starbucks and I'd be like tapping myself, and literally I know people were talking about me. I actually had this one girl come out, stand right in front of me, and when I say girl, she was a barista. Anyways, I won't say her name. I was don't want to embarrass her, but I had her come out, and she ended up essentially standing in front of me and then leaning down in front of me, like with her ass up towards me, trying to get my attention, perhaps because I was a person that they were talking about because I would constantly come in. So they were essentially, and I recognized a couple of the other persons were on the mics and they were talking to each other and such. But nonetheless, I had been seen as an oddity to the environment. And since then, I've started doing a lot more talking to the baristas at the Starbucks. I go to 3 different locations and I got to know them because I felt that that was important. I was using the app all the time and just picking the coffee up and then sitting down and then doing my tapping things and doing all that. And I was seen as, weird, but a lot of that energy was being projected upon me. And perhaps there was a really good reason for that because everything has a reason. And so maybe that reason was simply to make me stronger so that I could withstand more projections without having to utilize any sort of black magic. Because black magic can be seen as a many different ways. You can look at it as you're casting spells, and you even think of the word spelling and such, and or Harry Potter as black magic. But yet, black magic is also just gossip, especially when the gossip is, do you know what so and so said? Oh, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to actually bring any more of that into the world as an examples, but you know what gossiping means. And I'm sure because I've been involved in gossiping an awful lot that you have too. Now, the important part though is to recognize when we do things, when we put energy out into the world, especially negative energy, what you put out comes back to you. So let me say that again. What you put out, so when you gossip, when you say hurtful words, when you criticize without purpose, because constructive criticism is really good, but when you essentially just criticize and pull other people down to your level because you feel they're doing something that you really want to do, or, you just cast mud on their whole idea of wonderful plans. If you possibly don't think it's going to work, you can just like, oh, nice plan. Like you could actually comment the person's plan. And even if this person is constantly bringing up a plan and you're constantly, and it never works, perhaps it was because everyone they told never supported them. So that advice that I got from Kevin Trudeau was, don't let people steal your dreams. Don't go and tell everyone your dreams. Tell a few hand selected people that you know have your back all times of the day, that are going to ride with you until the wheels fall off. Those are the people that deserve, or that are eligible to hear what you have to say. But all the rest, and I'm learning that myself, like on my podcast, for example, I often talk about all the things that I want to do and all of the plans and different situations that I would love to be a part of. Well, unfortunately, none of those have yet to emerge. And yet I'm still consistently putting my intention, my positive energy on those, but also other plans as well, because I'm leaving it open to potentials beyond my own ability that I see right now. And I'm recognizing the world essentially could change at any moment in time. That was never better seen as what the scenes in the Son of or the House of David on Prime TV shown. The day that David, a shepherd boy, was sitting shepherding his sheep, and Samuel came over and said, "Okay, well, you know what's going on," and David was uncertain and he didn't understand how is he going to become the king of Israel when he's out here herding sheep and his father won't even let him go anywhere. And so that next scene from that in that show, one of the next scenes which came rapidly after is David was now in the army running with his slingshot at a giant when no one else wanted to face the giant, and he brought down the giant. See, his life changed abruptly. So I recognize that that's possible. And that's often why I will continuously put out these audios. And sometimes, this is the third time I've talked about projection, because this is one of the most powerful limitations that we have imprisoned ourselves with. Unknowingly, we don't believe that our words matter beyond our ear range, as if we can sit in a bathroom and say all the bad crap that we want to say and that no one heard us. Well, actually, I was just seeing whether or not it was actually working or not. Actually, I don't even know if this has been recording. The lights are now green, so we'll see. I'm going to press that back. Maybe there's just a change of color that's on the things. Anyways, so no matter where we are, our words hold power, our thoughts hold power. Even if we're thinking negative thoughts about someone, that's holding power and that's being transmitted. Whether it's transmitted to a degree that affects the other person in a negative way, or it empowers them to be more than they are. If you have to choose between one of those two possibilities, then of course I would highly encourage you, choose the possibility where you are empowering those people around you, that you are encouraging them. And that's what this world needs more of, in my opinion. We all need to perhaps support one of another to a higher degree, and we can at least support the world around us by refusing to get involved in those conversations that bring down and disempower not only us, but also everyone else in our world. So I'm going to leave it with that. And I definitely hope and I encourage you to, consider what I say. And as I always talk about, and I think I'm just going to keep repeating this because it needs to, at least in my opinion, based on my own experiences, reach the people that I'm looking for. And I realize I'm not looking to connect with the whole entire world, because a lot of the world are mired in situations that they have yet to even have the foresight or the ability to break out of that busy, 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 busy thing. That's why I created my do no thing challenges, is because they were 3-minute videos where the scroller who's constantly scrolling, 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 to be able to stop and watch the 3 minutes of stillness. And yet on most of those videos, the average view time is like 25 seconds. 25 seconds out of a 3-minute video. It really do mean that most people, they aren't able to sit there in stillness, in calmness and clarity of their mind. They're having to scroll on to the next thing. And that's how our reality was created in order to distort. And so, anyways, I highly encourage you. I'm going to leave at the end of this video. If you made it this far, I'm going to leave one of my do no thing videos so that you perhaps after this have an opportunity to watch that video and then come back to this video and comment your greatest takeaway, your greatest insight or reflection, or what cognition, or you can just leave a thank you or an emoji. Leave your favorite emoji. It can be a middle finger if you want, like no problem. Whatever it is, I'm open, because I realize where we are as a society and as a civilization, and as the Boys to Men said, we're at the end of the road. So if you want to have a better, healthier transitional phase, then definitely pick up this book and learn about rose hips. They are one of the most useful, important, abundant resources for health that we have. And you don't need to go to the store. You basically, after the petals on the rose plant have fallen off, there's a little part on the plant, and that's the fruit of the plant. And that's what you can therefore then utilize. Boil it in a tea-like substrate, like in a water or whatever. Mix it with your juices. Actually, one of the, I'll call it recipes that I can give you right now is take some rose hips, wash them off, of course, take some orange peel, prepare it if you wish. There's great videos online of how to prepare it. You can then take the dried, or in my case, I just take, the orange peels right off the orange and wash them. You can get those, put those two things in a tea and boil it, and then let them sit there for a while and let it cool down to room temperature, and you have an amazing, amazing iced tea. And so, anyways, and of course, there's ways that you can even make that better. You can add honey, you can add maple syrup, you can add whatever it is you like. You can add it to juice. I sometimes use a little bit of juice concentrate, mix it up, and it adds a sweetness to it. And it's an amazing way to get your body essentially energized, defended with all of those nutrients. And none of the EBV, which is the Epstein-Barr virus, which is responsible for so many different things. When you pick up the Medical Medium's book, he often talks about so many different things being great for it. But you can combat against that and bring your health back up to a place where perhaps it's been decades since you felt that young. So thank you so much to all the people who were watching. Thank you. I think there was 3 people on this particular stream. But more importantly, thank all the viewers for sharing your time and intention with me, because that's what's going to move us forward. Not the gossip in the coffee shop and even town halls where people are yelling and screaming at each other. None of that's going to do anything. It's going to keep us exactly where they want us to stay. And quite honestly, I have no interest in staying there. Anyways, have a nice day. Thank you so much. And as always, go over to my Patreon page, support me. You can do it for free. There's a free as well as a $1, as well as an $11. And for those people who really have the resources and really do want to change the world, I've introduced an $11,000 category as well. And so go over there, check out my photography, videography. I write other things, posts not only, but little other articles and such. So I encourage you to go over there and explore what there is to explore. But more importantly, go watch this Do Nothing video right now that's coming up. Have a wonderful day, and I encourage you to smile. Thank you.